Welcome. This is a discussion of Chapter 3 Excel lesson. It's ATC 3-9 on page 202 in the textbook. And what we have here is a problem where we're asked to create a worksheet and we're asked to create it from scratch. Now, you haven't had to do a worksheet from scratch before, but this time you do. And so I've been giving them to you completed. A few of you have been asking me, aren't we going to learn how to do them? And I said, yes, in time. And so the time has come. So here we are in Chapter 3, Week 4, and this will be our first time to really build an Excel spreadsheet from scratch. Now, ACT 3.9 says, Spreadsheet Assignment, Use of Excel. Adams Company started operations on January 1, 2013. 6 months later, on June 30, 2013, the company decided to prepare financial statements. The company's accountant decided to problem solve for the adjusting entries and final adjustment balances by using an electronic spreadsheet. Once the spreadsheet is complete, she will record the adjusting entries in the general journal and post to the ledger. The accountant has started the following spreadsheet, but wants you to finish it for her. So here we go. You are going to be her helper, and you're going to finish this spreadsheet. Now notice that it says spreadsheet assignment required on a blank spreadsheet. So I didn't exactly set you up on a blank spreadsheet. I gave you some instructions and I got you started on a couple of the lines so that you could begin to see how this would go together. But you do have quite a bit of typing to do here. So on a blank spreadsheet, with a little introduction. Enter the following trial balance in column A, columns A through C. Also enter the headings for columns E through I. Now, I have done the headings for you on columns E through I so that you can see them. I have put the trial balance and the debits and credits in there. And now you need to add the rest of the information. This is going to be tricky because I'm going to be typing and showing you, but you need to actually do it yourself. There's not a paper coming to you with this information. So you can watch me and I can demonstrate it for you, but then you'll have to still do it yourself. There's not a saved version of this somewhere. So they ask us to prepare first the trial balance. Now, one of the things, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to come into column A, and it says account titles on the same line that it says debit. So in 2A, I'm going to type account titles. Now, when I type account titles, it runs into B and the title for B goes away. So what I have to do is I have to press the enter key. Now I have the information that was in B, but not the information that I want in A. So we've looked at this before, I believe, and use two things you can do. You can put your crosshairs between A and B, and you can click down and drag that open for a distance, and you'll get account titles. I'm going to undo that for you just a minute. So that's the click and drag. You click on the line between A and B at the very top, and you just open this up for a width of what you want. Another thing you can do is to come up here, put your crosshairs on the line between A and B and double click, and when you double click it'll open up as wide as you need it to do. But notice what happens. It opens it up all the way for all my instructions up above. You certainly don't need it that wide. So in this particular instance, the hold down the left mouse and drag it out the width of another column to start with, just to see how that fits. Gives you the space you need for account titles. Now notice that account titles is also underlined. So, and it's underlined with the border underlined. So we come up to Home and open up the Home toolbar. We look for Fonts, under Fonts, and then right above the NT and Fonts is the border. If you click on that menu, you'll see all kinds of borders that show up. We happen to need this underline border that's clicked on my computer. I don't know what'll be on yours, so you do have to find the underline border. We click that in there, and then Account Titles has an underline. Now quite literally after this, the next thing I do is just type all these names. So I'm going to type a few for you, trusting that if I say cash and type cash, if I say certificates of deposit, that you could type those. If I do accounts receivable, and supplies, and prepaid rent, that you could again enter all of these. So office equipment. As you're typing these, you'll notice that there's new accounts with this chapter that we haven't used so much before. Now accounts receivable comes up automatically, but it's really accounts payable that I want. And then unearned revenues, common stock, retained earnings, service revenue. Now I've activated this box, so I can't just back up, so I have to go up here to the top to the function area, take out what I don't want, the two letters that I made the mistake, and then put it in up there. And then I can come back to this box. As long as I'm in this box and I don't activate out of it, I can make changes in the box. But once I activate it out of that cell, then I have to come up to the service function, to the function key up here and make the changes. So salaries expense, and operating expenses. So I put in the trial balance there. Now as I look at it, certificates of deposit are still a bit wider than what I have for a column. So I'm going to come back up to A and B. I have to click out of 23, A23, come up to the line between A and B, get my little black crosshairs, and pull it out enough so that certificates of deposit has space on the line. Now, once I have my spacing correct, then I can look down here and see that they also want me to skip a line and put in totals. So I skip a line and put in totals. Now, the trial balance names are in. When you look at a trial balance, they don't have dollar signs in them. They just have amounts. So we're going to put in amounts. Now, I'm going to use the number function over here in my numbers pad. You might not have one of those to use, so you'll have to use the numbers across the top. But I'm fortunate to have these. So I put in 1,500 and I put in 10,000, and I put in 12,000, and I put in 1,500, and I put in another 12,000, and I put in another 5,000. I put in a 5,000 for office supplies. Now I'm at accounts payable. And notice how the instructions show us to come across to the credit column, because accounts payable starts accounts that their normal balance is a credit balance, because that's how the accounts are increased. So for accounts payable, the amount is $2,500, and then it's $5,000, and then it's $20,000, and then it's $0, and then it's $35,000. But now I'm at expenses, so I come back to the debit column and put in 12,000, and then put in 4,500, and I have in all the accounts. Now, and I have in all the amounts. I don't know if I have them in correctly. I don't know if I've made a mistake someplace. I don't know just what's going on here, but that's what the total of debits and credits is supposed to tell me. So I highlight the two boxes where the total is going to be. I come back up under Home, next to the font, straight up above the N and the T, and I click on Bottom Border, and I get a bottom border for both of those columns. Now what I want to do here is sum the trial balance. So I'm going to go back up to the Home tab, come across to the Auto Sum, and now when I do the Auto Sum, it only picks up the last two numbers. It hits a blank and it doesn't keep going. So I've got to drag it up to the top all the way to the $1,500, the first debit, and now I can see the cell formula right down here in, and it's going to add for me B11, which is my first number, to B23, and I'm going to do enter, and I'm going to get a number. And now what I want to do over here, I could just drag that across this way, and if I click on it and I look up above, instead it's saying that it's adding this together for me, and that's C11 through C23. And it has changed the formula for me, and you can do that because it has changed the formula and you're adding together the correct columns. Now I said this would be a proof if it was right that those would equal, and mine do not equal. So now as I look at them, I need to look again, and my retained earnings is 35,000. My common stock is 20,000. My unearned revenues is 5,000, and my accounts payable are 2,500. So so those are correct. So now I'm going to go over and look at my debits. 1,500, 10,000, 12,000, 1,500, 12,000. Aha! Office supplies was office equipment was 9, and I read it as a 5. So I'm going to go in there, I'm going to change the 5 to a 9, and I'm going to enter that, and I found my own mistake. So I made a mistake of putting in the office equipment. I just went back and looked at those numbers, and I found them to be correct. Now this is the trial balance, and they equal one another. And remember, when we get totals, we put in a double underline to say that these are the final numbers and they balance. So I'm going to highlight both of the total cells. I'm going to look at this list of borders, and I'm going to go down the list, and I'm going to look for something that says bottom double border. So I start at the top and I look down at all these pictures, and I find one that says bottom double border. And I click on that, and then I click out of there, and I can see that I have a double border for my totals. Now it's asking me to think about the adjusting entries. So on number 1, I've done A. On a blank spreadsheet, enter the following trial balance in columns A through C. Also enter the headings for E through I. Now, next time I will present this with a totally blank worksheet, so you'll have to set it all up yourself. But I've put in where the adjusting journal entries are going to go, and I've put in where we're going to have the adjusted trial balance. Now, the first thing you have to put in are the debits and credits for the adjusting journal entry. So we're going to write debits in E and credits in, in G. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do debits in H and credits in I. So now we've entered those, and that's what we want. Those are going to be the columns in our adjusted journal entries for our debits and credits and in our adjusted trial balance. So now if you look at the debits and the credits, those titles are all on the left-hand margin, and we want them to be centered. So we're going to go back to the Home tab. We're going to go to the Adjustment section. We're going to look to the left-hand side of the Adjustment section. We're going to see how the margins are being applied, and we want this center, and it will, because I highlighted all 4 columns, it'll center all 4 of them at one time. Now then, the next thing I have to do is each of the following events requires an adjusting entry. Instead of recording them in the general journal, record them in the debit and credit columns under the headings Adjusted Journal Entries. Entry 1 has already been recorded as an example. So when I look at entry number 1, it says received a $5,000 cash advance on April 1 for a contract provided to provide 5 months of service. So this is July, this is June 30, July 1, June 30, and this transaction happened in April. So the question becomes, how much was the contract each month, and how many months have passed? So when I look back, received $5,000 cash for a contract to provide 5 months. So $5,000, 5 months, $1,000 a month. And then we have done April, May, and June. So we've done 3 of those months. So the entry for number 1 is, I'll put that in the little column between the before the adjusting entries, and I'm going to put $3,000 in to reduce the unearned revenues because they've gone down, and then I'm going to put a 1 down in service revenues because I'm going to make that a credit. Because those little columns before the debit and credit entries, you put the number of the transaction in there so that you can see what you have. So I had a debit to unearned revenues, the liability, making it come down because I've earned 3 months of this already. And then I have a credit to service revenues because I've earned that money and it can now show up in the revenues. And that's exactly what the example did as well. Now then, the next one says, had accrued salaries on June 1st amounting to $5,100. So we're going to look for salaries expense, and it's right there on line 22, and I'm going to look at salaries expense. I'm going to debit it because I had salaries expense, and it was $1,500. And now I'm going to look for salaries payable, and I don't have salaries payable that I see, at least. And so now I can, I have to decide where I'm going to put it. And I just realized that I don't have the solution open right this minute. So excuse me just a minute, I'm going to open it. And we'll know for sure how they want us to do this one. And I'm sorry that I wasn't prepared. I'm sorry that you're spending time watching this. You know how to move make it go faster while I look this up. I'm sorry, I'm opening more accounts than more files than I expected to. I don't know why I can't see this correctly. All right, well, I'm going to look one more place. Well, I'm sorry for that, so I'm going to take on my own, and I'm going to come down, and in this sample that we're working on, it says 27, so I'm going to put salaries payable. And that's an obligation I have to pay sometime in the future. So I'm going to put a 2 on that transaction and put $1,500 credit into item 2. And I'm going to scroll this up just a bit so you can see how this looks. There we go. You can see that I came down here and put in salaries payable, put a 2, these two match with each other, 15 debit, 15 credit, and it is salaries expense and salaries payable. So that's how I'm going to enter that into the adjusting entry. Now, number 3 says, on January 1, invested in a 1-year $10,000 certificate of deposit that had a 5% interest rate. So the formula here is rate times time times amount. So, and remember, the interest rate is always stated per annum, so you have to make the time based on 12 months or 360 days, because the time and the interest rate have to be in the same metric, which in this case is years. So when we look at this, rate is 5%, amount is $10,000. Now the time is January through June, or 6 months, or half the year. So 1% would be $1,000. Excuse me, 10% would be $1,000. 5% would be $500, and then half of $500, which would be 6/12 for the half of a year, would be $250. So I'm going to have interest expense, and interest payable. Now, again, you really have to know your adjusting entries from Chapter 2, bringing them forward to put them in here. And then you have to do the transactions, and you have to begin to expand the spreadsheet where it doesn't have the information that you need. So I have this $5,000. I have to put that $500. I have to put that in here for entry 3, and I have to do a debit to entry expense to make it go up for entry 3. So a debit to the expense, a credit to the payable, and I've recorded that transaction. I'm just sitting here thinking, this is very dangerous. I have neither a computer nor a I just thought of how I do have a computer. And I'm going to show you that right now. But I'm going to come up here where you can see it better. So I did this in my head. But look at this. If I come over to Home, and I come over to Sum, and in this K cell I have up here, I have $10,000. Wait a minute. Oh, this was certificate of deposit. I'm going to change it. $10,000 times 0.05, because it's 5%, times, and now it is 6/12, 6 over 12, and we'll see what that comes to. $250. That was just that was the same as what I had, but I didn't type. But look at this. This is what I have wrong. But I'm not going to retype everything. This is interest revenue, because it's interest that I've earned for having my money invested, and interest receivable, because they're going to send it to me at some point. So I have interest receivable in number 3 for $250, and interest receivable for $250. Now I'm going to use this handy little cell up here for us to see our math with the rest of these transactions, so that you can begin to see how to do them. So invested, a certificate of deposit, I would expect to receive interest income for them using my money, and I'd expect them to pay me at the end of the year. January 1, paid $12,000 in advance for a 1-year lease on office space. So January 1, paid $12,000. So it's this $12,000 right up here for this accounts receivable. The reason I didn't do anything to the certificate of deposit is I'm just recognizing the economic effect of the earning the interest, but I didn't do anything with the investment. I just left it. But now on the prepaid rent, that asset, I've been using that for a while. So since January, I have used on a 1-year lease for office space. So it's $12,000 for 12 months, or $1,000 a month. So I'm going to come back up here, and in this equation, I'm going to put 1, 2, 3, divide by 12, and I'm going to come outside of the bracket, and then I'm going to put times, so I want it to multiply, and I have 6 months, January through June. So I have times 6 months, and I do an enter, and it tells me that I've earned $6,000, but I've also used up $6,000 of prepaid rent. So when I come up here to prepaid rent, entry number 4 is going to reduce my prepaid rent by $6,000 because I've used some of it, but then my rent expense has to go up, and I don't have rent expense in my other accounts, so I'm going to charge rent expense, and it's going to be, this is transaction 4, and it's going to be $6,000. And so I've calculated first the rent, and then I've entered it. So now received in the mail a utility bill dated June 30 for $150. So I'm going to record utility bill expense, or utility expense, and utilities payable, and enter that into my spreadsheet, and it'll be for $150. I'm going to purchase $1,500 of supplies as of, I already did purchase $1,500 of supplies, and as of June 30, 700 remained on hand. So 700 remained on hand. So the question is, how many did I use up? So I'm going to come up here in my little equation, and I'm going to say I began with supplies of 1,500, and I ended with supplies of 750. Hopefully we don't, many of us need a calculator for that one. And so I'm going to, what's the sum of the difference of those two? And I've used up 750. So when I look at my supplies here on line 14 are going down. So I want to reduce those supplies, and I want to recognize supplies expense down here in my in the bottom portion of my worksheet. And then paid $9,000 for office equipment on January 1, which we know. The equipment is expected to have a 4-year life and a $1,000 salvage value. So we're going to have $9,000 for the cost minus $1,000 for the salvage to give us a depreciation amount of $8,000. And it's going to have a useful life of 4 years. So $8,000 allocated over 4 years would be $2,000 a year. And so then I would put in depreciation expense and accumulated depreciation. Also, down here in this part of my equation, I'd be adding all those new accounts. And then when I finally finished with this one, it says develop formulas to sum both the debits and the credits. So when I come down here, I'm going to sum them in this column. And when I want to sum here first, I'm going to go home and to auto sum. And again, it's going to want to stop on me because I want it to go all the way up to all of my debits in my adjustments. And I'm going to enter. Now my number is not right because I didn't enter all the transactions. So you'll have to enter all the transactions and get a number. And then over here, I'm going to go to the Home tab, to the Sum tab, take that all the way to the top of the transactions. Now mine do equal because what I put in was correct. And you will want yours to equal. You just won't want it to equal that number. Now, the last instruction says, develop a formula to derive the adjusted balances for the adjusted trial balance. And then it gives you an example of unearned revenues. So if we look at unearned revenues are right there on line 20. And it says that I want to go to the home, tell the sum that I want it to be, oops, I'm one too high. Let's cancel that. And come down, excuse me. There we are on unearned revenues. Oops, got a problem here. Okay, sorry about that. I clicked on the wrong unearned revenues. Now I want to go to Home and to Autofill, and it's going to reach across there and grab my transactions. And now at that point, I have to tell it the pluses and the minuses that I want. So instead of using the colon, what I have here is I have a credit and a debit. So I want to know the difference between those two numbers. So then I put it in, so I'm going to do it a different way. I'm still going to look up here at the sum. I'm going to take that out. I'm going to go the sum, and now I'm going to click on the C18 I'm going to show you another way. It's going to be equal to the sum, and I'm going to put in a parentheses, and then I'm going to click on the C18 box, and I'm going to say minus the E18 box. I'm going to do off the parentheses, You might not have to do off the parentheses, but I do, and I get $2,000. So you're going to want to create that. That's the example shown in D. And then if I were going to do another one here on office equipment, now I can't just drag because these are all different formulas. So here I'm going to go equal the sum on parentheses, and I've got a credit of $12,000, and then I want to do a plus another credit of $6,000, and then I want the off parentheses, and I want to enter. And so I'll do that for each of the accounts till I get its balance. Now remember, here you can just do equals this and enter, and here you could do, remember we were using this equals function in week 1, and so you can just fill in all of those, but you have to do the calculations in the columns where you have calculations. And then down here you'll get a total in the debit column and a total in the credit column, and they need to equal one another. And I'm not going to do more of that for you because I want to leave you having to do some of this work on your own. I want to leave you finishing this problem and doing it on your own. So good luck, and think about the rules you've known so far, and remember, each week I'm going to be weaning you off of a completed assignment. So if you have any questions, send me an email. If you have any concerns, you want to come by and talk to me in the office, that's fine. And you can even ask in class, and I'll be happy to answer them. But now we're really down to using the theory of debits and credits with Excel in this assignment. So thank you all for listening to this. I hope it's been helpful. I feel like it probably has. And even though I'm not finishing it for you, that's really hopeful because I believe you can do it. Have a good adventure with Excel and the theory of debits and credits.